Everybody, welcome back to my garage. Judging from the analytics, it seems like a lot of people enjoyed my Roller Girl video, and you might have seen another car in the background, which is my 2013 NC Club. So we're not going to do a full walkthrough of the car today, but I want to talk about the first project for the car, and that's to replace the head unit. I think I'm going to break this up into multiple videos, one with the full installation of the stereo and the door speakers. But for the sake of this video, I want to talk about some of the things that are not commonly discussed. In particular, we're going to talk about this 3D printed part for the backup camera, as a 3D printed part for the USB-C mount that replaces the headphone jack. I want to quickly talk about the different options you have for a backup camera. One of the popular options that I see people do is they actually use a license plate frame, and that basically attaches to your two bolt holes here, and then there is a camera that's attached, and then folks will typically run a wire from the trunk over to the license plate frame. And I think that works pretty well, but I just don't like the wire hanging out of here, and it kind of gives it a messy look. So I wanted to extend the OEM Plus look and utilize some of the spots that are available for us to use. Okay, if we were to take a look at the trunk, there are a couple of options that we have for us to mount a camera. Either A, we find something to replace the license plate lamp. I think AliExpress sells one for about $18, and it's a complete unit that has the camera and this housing, and then you would just reuse your bulb in here. It's about $18. It looks a little bit cheap, and I was a little bit wary of trying it out. So that kind of leaves us with the trunk release spot. So if you have a club or a touring, you don't have the advanced keyless button here. But if you do have a GT, it might come with something that looks like this. So this is just a trunk release button, and if you have the key on your person, you press this button and you'll be able to release the trunk. So I think that this is the best option for us here, and there are some cameras that allow you to screw directly into sheet metal or plastic, and then we could, in theory, run the wiring through here. However, just we'll take this apart and we'll show you what the back of it looks like, and we'll show you if it's a viable solution or not. This is what the blank looks like once you have it removed. I would say it's about 1 to 2 millimeters thick if you don't include the foam tape that's surrounding the perimeter. And then if you take a look underneath, there are some ribs inside to give it some sturdiness. I think in a pinch you could probably drill in some screws and mount your camera that way, but I think over time, just the thinness of this plastic, it might come loose. And then also there is no way for us to add some wiring, so you would probably have to drill in a larger hole to thread through the RCA jacks. So that would be a rather large hole that we would have to drill, and we'd have to be concerned about some water intrusion as well. One other thing that we need to take into consideration if we decide to mount it on the trunk is that any camera that we do install needs to clear this lip. If it's mounted flush up against the sheet metal here or near to the sheet metal, you'll have an obstructed view, and we obviously don't want that. So I haven't been able to find anything available online that was clean, and I decided just to try my hand at 3D design and 3D printing to see if I can come up with a good solution. So this backup camera mount is based on some 3D designs that I saw on Thingiverse, and then I tried just modifying those files, but then I ended up just recreating the model myself. And then this backup camera is something I already have experience with. I installed this on my brother's 07 Civic, and I thought it was a pretty good camera, and it's pretty popular on Amazon, and they go for about $40. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and do the assembly of the camera. When you buy the camera itself, it'll come with these different wedges. And I guess if you use them together, you can basically create different mounting angles for your camera. But for our application, we're just gonna go ahead and use the thinnest one. So I'm gonna go ahead and thread this through. So I think what we wanna do is have the tape be attached to the metal part of the camera and not on the mount itself. So we'll need to make sure that we thread this appropriately. So that double-sided tape will go up against the metal piece here. And then we'll thread the camera through the top hole. Oops. So it should mount something like this. To tighten it, we're going to use a 13mm wrench. And you can just go through the backside here and tighten it. Make sure that you're holding your camera firm so it doesn't get tilted. And then just tighten it down. Okay, once that's on, we're going to use the backing plate. So you'll notice that one edge has a little bit of a taper on it. That's going to match the slope of the camera mount itself. So you'll just want to insert it into the slot in the back here and then just slide it in. You might have to press out in the back to get it over to the guides and then just snap it in place. All right, let's just take a look at the final product here. So it's pretty blocky by design, just to make it easier to print. And then it has a large opening at the bottom here. It really shouldn't be an issue because we're going to be mounting it upside down, and there really isn't a way for water to get inside of your trunk. The OEM part actually has a 1mm foam tape gasket, I guess. I don't think you really need it on this 3D printed part because the way I've designed it, it sits pretty snug and it doesn't rattle around. I think we might want to put some foam tape just in case, just to get a more watertight seal. But for the most part, I haven't needed to use it. But it's something that's optional and something that you might want to do on yours. So there are a couple of options that you have available to you when you want to add USB support for your head unit. Typically, a lot of folks will just use the cigarette lighter location and remove that. And Amazon sells a bunch of different mounts that would fit in here perfectly. I did that originally on my NC1, but once I swapped over to the NC2 console, I wanted to retain the cigarette lighter in case there might be some accessories that will use this socket, in particular the air pump. And then also here we have originally we have a headphone jack. So I thought that this would be the perfect place for it, and it would give it that OEM Plus look. Let's take a look at the USB mount. It comes in two pieces, the front fascia, which is just the front plate, and then the back bracket. So in order to assemble this, we'll need to take the USB adapter and take the female end and slot it through the hole in the back of the bracket. So once we have that in place, then we're going to take the front fascia, and then there's going to be a bigger slot in the back and then a smaller one. So the bigger one is going to take the fatter end, and then slimmer one is going to take this more narrow end up here. So before we put that on, we'll actually just want to thread through the female end to the front of the fascia and just make sure that it's flush. And then we'll just insert it in here. Oops. Let me try that again. I think the plug came undone. So you might just want to make it poke through a little bit just so that it's sturdy. And then when it's in place, we'll put it back to where it needs to be. And then just snug this thing through. And then there you have it. And then we have our plug. It doesn't require any super glue, but if you want, you might just want to glue in the edges. But it's a pretty good fit. So if you were to press it in here, basically these prongs here will prevent it from pushing the whole plug back. I guess you could, in theory, pull it forward, but I don't think the USB cable is going to be strong enough to pull forward without it actually just releasing from the female end. So, okay, I just noticed one thing that I wanted to share with everyone. So this top prong here, it should sit flush in between the groove right there. So sometimes I guess when you're sliding it on, it doesn't seat very well. So you could take something flat, like either a screwdriver, and what I did, I just have this this toe clipper, and I just press this in here, and then just make sure that it's sitting flush inside that groove, and you know that will basically give it a lot more resistance from moving around. Okay, I wanted to walk you guys through a older design of the USB mount. So this was really a remix of a version that was available on Thingiverse. I actually used the original back panel here as part of my design, and this is just basically a carbon copy of the original design. And it has a front fascia, and it didn't have any prongs here at all. And they basically just have these 4 little nibs over here to basically help you guide where to insert the back bracket. And then you would just use super glue in here to make it all one piece. I didn't like that idea. I wanted to see if I can come up with a design that would just be just plug and play and it wouldn't require any glue. So one of the things I introduced was the concept of a USB tray. And that way, if you were to press, plug in your USB cable, if you press hard enough, we don't want it to go all the way through and basically get released from the front fascia. So basically I wanted to have this tray in place to be a back stopper for the USB tray itself. I mean the USB adapter itself. So what I did was I introduced that, and then I added these prongs in place to act as sandwiches to the top and bottom of the tray itself, and hopefully that was going to provide enough friction to prevent it from sliding back. And I think for the most part it works pretty well, but I ended up adding just these stoppers on the outermost prongs here. And the idea would be that you would just plug this in. Actually, we want to put the back bracket here, and then the tray itself also had these little stoppers. And then we would just plug this guy in here and then just snap it in place. And then, basically you would have a single mount that wouldn't require any glue. And then after taking a look at this, this back bracket is still kind of wobbly, And I just thought to myself, why does it actually need to be three different pieces? And I think the reason why I kept that here was because the original design that this was based off of, this was a separate piece. So what I ended up doing was just merging this outer bracket with the tray, and that's what you saw with the current version here. The video description is going to have links to the downloadable files, and when you click on it, it's going to take you to printables.com, and I wanted to walk everyone through the different available files. So you'll see some print files and some model files. The print files are going to be used by your 3D printer, and this is basically the plot map for the print itself, and it's also going to include some print settings like what type of filament you're going to use, the temperature of the nozzle, and so forth. And a lot of times these print files are going to be optimized for a particular printer. So the one that I've uploaded is going to be for the Ender 3, which is kind of a low-end 3D printer that's available on Amazon. And I think they have it on sale right now for about $190. So if you have one of those, go ahead and download this file and you can just print directly from there. And then I also include the model files. So the model files are the actual 3D models. And what a lot of people do is they'll download these files and import them into their favorite slicer. So let's actually go through two of my favorite slicer applications. The first one is going to be the Creality slicer, and this is what came with my Ender 3 printer. And I do want to make note that I think that this is a better software to use to print out the camera mount. And that's because this camera mount requires some supports in order to build. And for those that aren't familiar with 3D printing, sometimes a model can have overhangs, and it's difficult for the printer to print out areas that are kind of hanging out there in the open. So what the software will do, it'll actually generate these supports, and basically these supports will then be removed from the print itself, but they're there just to provide structural support while it's printing. And the Creality slicer, when it generates these supports, I think they're a lot easier to remove than my favorite slicer, which is the Prusa slicer. And the reason why I like it is because it has a lot of UI features and it's just generally easier to use. Let's go ahead and import our models. So we'll go ahead and import the backup camera as well as the backing plate. And when you do that, it ends up placing it on the bed. And you can use your mouse, hold down the button, and then you can rotate the bed just to get a better view of everything. But the first thing we'll have to do is rearrange everything because right now they're kind of on top of each other. The Prusa slicer has this nice little convenient auto arrange feature. You click on that and it figures out the best layout. And when you take a look at the model, you can see that it's on its face. And the reason why I put it in this orientation is so that we don't have to generate very many supports for it. As I mentioned before, when you're doing a print, things like this ledge right here can't just print midair. If it's small enough, you probably can get away with it, but for something large like this, it might cause some structural issues during the print. So the software itself lets you auto-generate some support materials. So by default, this is going to be turned on, and there are different styles of supports. The default one for the Prusa slicer are the organic supports. So if we were to click on this button, it gives us a preview of what it would look like once it's printed out. And they have these cool tree-like structures that provide the support. And using this slicer, I've always had issues with removing these supports after they're printed, especially with the PTG filament types. And they tend to fuse to the model, and it's really hard for us to remove it. I always have to take some sort of sharp instrument to try to remove it, and that could be a tedious job. My experience is that any of the supports that are on the bed itself are easy to remove. The supports that are inside of this hole are going to be a little bit more difficult to remove because they're single pillars, or they're multiple pillars inside, and they're going to be fused to the model itself instead of to the bed. And just pressing that in, it's going to end up breaking somewhere in the middle of the support instead of on the edges. So I don't recommend using the organic supports. Let's try a different setting here. They have something more traditional, like a grid. If we go back to the platter, we can regenerate it. And again, even using the grid, I felt that this was a little bit difficult for me to remove because the way that they have the zigzag design in the middle, and when I press into the middle, it doesn't come off in one piece. It ends up just breaking somewhere in the middle, and then again, you have to take a sharp instrument to remove it. So the recommendation here is to use the Creality slicer. I'm sure that there might be some settings that we can tweak to make it easier to remove, but I'm not a 3D printing expert, and I'm relatively a neophyte at this. So my recommendation is to stick with the Creality slicer. We go over the USB-C model. Once we've imported it into Prussia, we'll go ahead and rearrange everything. And by default, it's going to be in this orientation. And we'll need to change it because this is going to require a lot of supports to print. One of the nice features in Prussia is that they have this tool called Place on Face. And what that allows you to do is you select a plane, and clicking on that will basically put that at the bottom, and it makes it easier to print. So for the fascia, we'll click on the front face, and then for the back bracket, we'll click on the back. And doing so, this is the optimal orientation to print this without any supports. The overhangs that you see here are really small, and at least my Ender 3 printer can handle something like this without any supports. And then once we have everything oriented the way that we want, we can click on this preview. This basically does the slicing. And as you can see here, we can actually preview the slicing. You can use this slider to go layer by layer to see how the printer is actually going to lay everything out. And then once you're satisfied, click on the export G-code, and then that'll write the G-code file. In the downloadable link that I have, I actually ended up using the Creality slicer just to be consistent. But for this particular model, the Prussia slicer works just fine. Thanks everyone for watching my video. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions about the 3D models or my 3D printer, just leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to get to them as soon as I can. Thanks a lot.